A lot of amazing songs came out in the 90s. This is one fantastic record, and you probably don't know this because the top 40 radio stations were not playing some of the most amazing records that came out in the 90s. I took this baby to #1 on my fancy playlist. Down to number 11, though, the week of October 18th, 1997. Down from #1 the previous week, Forest for the Trees with Dreams. This is a kaleidoscope of psychedelic, hip-hop, sampling. You got the bagpipes going, Space Cadet lyrics, ironic. It's just... And the sound effects, water dripping, answering phones that were used on the album Forest for the Trees. It was a self-titled album that infused real life into abstract music. You got this delicious juxtapositioning of abstract music with sound effects with abstract music. Real life sound effects. Forest for the Trees was the brainchild of a guy named Carl Stevenson. Carl Stevenson, he worked on Beck's first album. He co-produced Beck's debut album, which was called Mellow Goat. He co-wrote and he co-produced Beck's opening single, Loser, back in 1994. Around this time, he started working on his own album. But he tinkered on this album. He worked hard on this album. He messed with it, and he had a nervous breakdown. And that delayed release of the album for several years. The album, which was Forest for the Trees, came out in 1997. Forest for the Trees had several rotating musicians. A lot of musicians played in this group, according to Wikipedia. Some of the names that were thrown out was Mark Peterson, Don DeFice, Chris Camacho, he played bass, and Beck might have also been a member at one time or played in Forest for the Trees, the group Forest for the Trees. And Carl Stevenson, pretty talented. He not only produced and formed this band, he also played the violin, drums, guitar, and that's it. I know I've said this so many times that you're probably please just shut up about Hitline. That's what you're going to say. But I'm going to say it again. Hitline played this one. That's where I heard this record, Forest for the Trees. If it wasn't for Hitline, I'm going to be honest with you right now. If it wasn't for Hitline, my fancy playlists in the 90s would not have been as rich as they were. And I would not be able to introduce these songs to you, these offbeat records that were not played on the FM radio stations, because they were just ratings losers as far as they were concerned. And they're probably right. I mean, let's face it. But they're still great records. Different novelty records. I love novelty records because I grew up in the 60s and 70s when there were a lot of novelty records. The 50s, there were a lot of novelty records. And the DNA stays in your system. And when you hear something offbeat like this, it's like, yes, with a capital Y. Forest for the Trees at number 11 with Dreams on my fancy playlist. October 18th, 1997. Love those bagpipes.